Today on Body Count, we begin part 2 of Genghis Khan.
Why would historians or people just sitting around, why would they want to narrate an 8-year-old kid's life? He's literally just dicking around in the grasslands, killing animals with rocks, learning how to sword fight. His dad's probably beating his ass for something he didn't do right. So, fun fact, figured this out. His name Temujin means in that time of the Mongolian language, can mean one of two things, iron or blacksmith.
Right. When it's translated like that. And what was actually interesting to me is a Tartar name. It's a Turkish name.
Yeah.
And so when they translate it to blacksmith and all of that, what I also found out is it would be like the goods that you used, essentially like the look in a horse's eye when he's not going to listen to who's riding him and do his own will. There's so many interpretations of that. And I think that is like interesting, super interesting. It's just so weird that there's not a concrete meaning for his name, because you're exactly right. It's all those things in one. So it was almost to me like this, at very least, his father believed he would do something, just not what. But to that point again, like you're exactly right. His father named him that, and he wasn't daddy's favorite. We'll put it that way. His sort of like shithead dad left him behind on accident once when moving camps. Now, the Taichud clan found him, and the leader took him into his households and kept him for some time. Now, the leader of this clan claimed later, as Temujin started to become the proverbial shit, that the clan Khan claimed that he trained him of the Taichud. Now, we don't really know how Temujin managed to get back to his family, but the Taichud were essentially served by the Borjin clan of his father. Just suffice to say, Temujin made it back home somehow. So the next thing we know in the histories, Temujin was being taken by his father to seek out a future wife at 8. So they're not wasting any time on the steppes of Mongolia. But to be fair, all the longer most people lived, that was like it was time to get a full-time job, at 8, all the longer people lived usually at that time. And Genghis Khan, again, did have an unusually long life, all things said. He was just tough as nails. So your childhood was basically over to me when you stopped being a baby and could form words, I guess. That's almost when they went into training. It blows my mind. So you can walk, here's a horse and a bow and arrow, figure it out. We are so screwed as a civilization if everything goes to shit and goes south, because we can't do that now. Things that they did. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If things went to ancient Mongolian level, where as soon as a 3-year-old can walk, you're popping him on a horse and teaching him to shoot a bow and arrow. I mean, can you imagine? We can't do that now. It blows my mind how hardcore these people were. I don't know about you, but it struck me.
His dad fucking left him at a camp. Oh, well, shit. My dad forgot me. What am I going to do? He learned, he adapted, and that's why he became one of the biggest, most,
badasses of history. I agree, because any other child might have panicked, but he hung out there, and knowing that the Borjin clan was allied with the Taichud, he waited, and he was taken in by that family. So, I mean, he was obviously, even as a young child, he was already had that sort of mindset. And that's what amazes me. Most of the things he's going to achieve in the future happen before he's 20. It blows my mind. And then, like we said, lives are short, but his was particularly long. So he had a really long time. This guy is absolutely amazing. He absolutely blows my mind. But Yasuge, which is Temujin's father, and Temujin take off to find Oilun's people to like pick a bride from her tribe, if that makes sense. And remember, they were like super sexy nomad girls, and no doubt like Oilon wanted him to have some connection to his family through her. But I mean, let's stop and break for just a second, because family connections were all that mattered on the steppe at that time. And then so Temujin was also having trouble with his slightly older brother by Yasuge's other wife, where maybe they were already going at it. Like the rivalry between Temujin and the other wife's oldest son seems like a pretty old one. Now, if Temujin had to leave and he had to work, like we discussed earlier, for his bride for some time, like I feel like their father thought maybe that's going to cool the rivalry a little bit. Temujin only had a horse to give as a gift to someone, so he was going to have to put in some serious like wife earning labor, like some real time with the family. But Daddy phoned it in from afar and didn't end up taking Temujin to his mother's people. So while they were riding their ponies down the trail, they stayed with a family who had a daughter named Borta. She was the perfect age for the delicate dance we described earlier in this tale about how one ends up being married Mongol style. Plus, these two crazy kids got on like a house on fire. And so the two proud papas said, fuck it, let's betroth them. So Temujin stayed to get down to some bride earning work, which I have to say I'm glad that system is gone. Like, Jesus Christ, what a nightmare, right? Ugh.
Could you imagine your current better half having to work for you? Like, you'd almost be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
What the fuck are you doing? Like, get out of here. Just go steal a bride. Exactly. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Just go steal a bitch.
Can't just swipe left or right at that time or try and befriend them on Bumble.
I don't even know what Bumble is. Right, because
you don't know what Bumble is.
No, I don't. Recently, very recently, somebody told me what Tinder was. And guess what? It's not. Like stuff that's used to start a fire. Let me put it that way. It blew my mind. So I don't even want to know what Bumble is. That like scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. All right. So there was no swiping left or right. There was no checking your Bumble connections. There was no paid service. There was no drop in DMs. This was good old fashioned. Hey, I'm 8 years old. You're older than me. Probably illegal at this like current time of where we live. This would probably be along the lines of some kind of sexual harassment this day and age,
right?
Happening.
Like, if not full-blown pedophilia, despite the age of the girl. Because they were older. I think she's like 3 years older than him. Oh my God, that's crazy. Like, can you imagine having to work for your bride? Or your other option would just be to kidnap somebody. That is insane. Like, these people were so hard. They were so hard.
And I mean, that's easy to do. I mean, these people didn't have like permanent, like full house dwellings. I mean, we're talking kind of like an Indian style teepee.
Like a yurt, or they called them gurs. The best that we can, like, you could collapse them down and you could erect them back up anywhere that they chose to move.
Yeah. I mean, you literally could be sleeping one night with your wife, get fucking raided on, and then your wife is gone the next day and you're left with the burnt home. All your belongings are now just ash in the ground and you literally have to start all over.
I know. It's amazing to me. And then what's interesting to me about that is because warriors had to take care of generally a whole clan, they would oftentimes leave. They were just forced to leave the weaker, that they couldn't move quickly, or to allow some women to stay so they could get kidnapped. And this will become important in our story. But leave some women where they could get kidnapped because they know that they could like ride away and puke and rally and come back. That's how intense and fast these raids were. It blows my mind. Living in that kind of like insecure environment, it blows my mind. We're so not ready if it goes Mr. Robot shit. It's just, we're not.
Yeah.
God.
Go raid your next door neighbor's house and steal their husband. See how that goes.
See how that goes. Exactly right. So
I mean, I know where you're at, but in Texas, I'm getting a bullet to the head. Just saying.
Oh, that happens in Georgia as well. Let me tell you. You don't yell at anybody in traffic in Atlanta. Let me put it that way. You just you stay there because they'll beat the shit out of you before they do that. Here, they'll beat the shit out of you and then kill you after they're done, after they've ripped you out of their car. It blows my mind. So, on this long trip home, and you're going to be able to speak to this too, something happens to Yasuge. According to the secret history, it said he decided he wanted to join a part of a party being thrown by some Tartars. Now, this is somebody from the tribal group that he had killed earlier named Temujin, and then gave that name to his son. Now, he had, as I said, killed a few of the Tartar people in an earlier raid. So he supposedly was hiding his identity, was still found out anyway, because he doesn't, at the end of the day, seem too much of a thinker. And then he was poisoned. Did you get that out of your research as well?
Yes, very brief. I mean, something along the lines of possibly, and I don't want people to think that this is true because like you said, it's kind of a secret. Possibly sharing a meal at a wedding, got poisoned. I don't know. Did you have something along the lines like that?
Yeah, I got it instead of sharing a meal at a wedding. I got it in that Tartars had enjoyed a recent victory over some other clan, and he still went to that party. But I mean, it's basically the same story. But
Yeah.
You're exactly right. I don't want people like believing this as pure truth because, like I said, who knows how true the secret histories are. And this is coming from conjecture.
Yeah.
But
Basically, he got dealt what he deserved.
and Yasuge deserved it 110%. You're exactly right.
So I believe that we could point out he was at something big and he got poisoned. I mean, that's really all people need to know.
Yeah.
The who, what, when, where, and
Something
why.
happened to him at this big event that made him like seriously ill. I
Yes.
agree. Like we said, who knows? But either way, he survived long enough to make it at least back to his camp, where he sent for Temujin, who was forcibly boarded behind and rushed to his father's deathbed. But he didn't make it. So half-assed dad was dead as a doornail, leaving behind 2 wives and 7 children under the age of 10. So that means they weren't like any of them workers yet, or breedable, sadly enough, in the context of the time.
Yeah.
Now,
You think they could qualify for food stamps and WIC?
Unfortunately, freaking no, because God, what's about to happen is even worse. Oh my God, it's awful. So, the clan essentially saw no use for the 2 widows and 7 like young children, despite like the Mongols supposedly her brother-in-law should have married Oilan and somebody else should have married the other mother. They didn't. And they didn't really recognize the customs of the time. But again, that could be like they were a mountain clan. It's like what you spoke to earlier. Times were tough. They couldn't handle 9 extra mouths to feed. So like we had said, brother-in-law would marry, or the wife marries the son that's oldest of the other wife. Like, I did found this very interesting, whereas it was kind of lost in later ages with Habsburgs and everybody else. Like, the Mongols were super careful about non-safe inbreeding. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you were going to marry a cousin, it was a kissing cousin. Like, that was something that was sacred to them.
Yeah.
So it meant that they never mixed chromosomes. They had, very strong gene pool. I thought that was really interesting. And I don't know how they knew that. I can only assume that time and like experience, maybe even from when the Huns were in Mongolia, that it stuck with them that they weren't inbreeders in a royal family sense. Let me put it that way. But Oilun didn't have a close connection, with her kin anymore after the death of Yesige. She didn't have a close connection with the Merkid because they didn't know where she was or were starting to find out where she was. So no man could earn prestige or alliance by marrying her, if that makes sense, because she hadn't communicated with her family. They're not going to gain any money. They're not going to gain any valuable alliances. She already had too many children for a normal man who was not a Khan, great or small, to support. So the clan just decided to leave first wife Sojagil and second wife Olan behind with all their children. Only one old man objected loudly and fiercely to the women and children being cut off from the clan family. And he was actually speared by a young man that basically yelled at him he had no right to criticize. So the secret history records this as like making a hell of an impression on Temujin. This man had essentially sacrificed himself to try and save them, to do the right thing. It is said that Temujin ran to the old man, and after seeing there was nothing like that he could do, he sobbed in hurt and anger. And this might be the day his heart filled with a little anger and resentment, folks, because shit only gets rougher from here. Let me put it that way. Oilun was supposed to go, supposedly so thoroughly shamed them that they stayed during the day after they tried to walk away after killing the old man to creep away like dogs by the night and desert the family and the fallen leader Yesige, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing to point on. These mountains in Mongolia are like no fucking joke. We're talking one of the highest mountainous countries in the world. Average elevation around 1,500 meters. That's about 5,000 feet. I mean, the mountains in this area, yet pretty, are no fucking joke. So it was a struggle, I would say.
You're exactly right. And now, a century later, they may seem more rugged. This all may have seemed broken down, but you have to understand in the scope of world history, like the Himalayas, the Alps, those are baby mountains. These mountains have been here since forever. They're very, very old. You're exactly right. That's a good point.
And the temperatures around this time, I mean, you're right next to Russia. And when we think of Russia, we think of a barren fucking wasteland. So just pointing that out there.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because the steppes, the mountains, but one of their points at which they broke was Lake Baikal, and that is up in Siberia now. So the reality is the modern map is not going to show you what a rough area these people lived in. I agree with that. It's crazy. So after they had abandoned the family, these bastards even took their animals, basically in their mind, assuring that this family would starve as winter was coming. But they didn't know Oilun very well because her family wasn't going to die. No, she organized them all and they hunted and gathered like a motherfucker. They survived. Temujin made wooden arrows tipped with sharp bones to hunt and bent sewing needles to make fish hook. As the boys grew, they started to take down, larger game. Still, this was a fucking life or death struggle every day for this family. Oliver Twist was living a good life compared to Temujin, let me tell you. You couldn't get lower than these poor people were in the hierarchy of steppe living. But I will contend that it made him hard. No doubt about that. The rough living he was doing seemed to make him say that the strict caste structure was bullshit, and that these people don't matter. They left us, and they shouldn't have done by the caste structure that existed on the steppes at the time. So he was going to break that, take charge of what happened to him, and rely on alliances he could make versus easily breakable family like clan bonds. So Temujin learned very early on that birth had shit to do with worth, that loyalty was everything, and that a man's merit mattered. So from these principles, only, he would build an intense support system. It's around this time he makes an important acquaintance that would lead him on his path to becoming Genghis Khan. Temujin meets a slightly older boy named Jamuka, and this would be the first of some very powerful future associations that he would have. So Jamuka's family was often camped near Temujin's, and Jamuka was part of the Jadaron clan. I'm going to say that's it, Jadaron clan. The Jadaron were distantly related to Temujin, like Temujin's so-so father's clan. We have to stop here quickly and say, on the steppe, family formed the backbone of all social principle and interaction. Not related equally, not related to somebody equal, like they were an enemy of yours. And the closer related, the closer the bond should be. I don't know if that makes any sense in principle. So Jamuka and Temujin were cousins, but they wanted to be closer, if that makes sense. Closer in a tribal sense. So the two became blood brothers, which was not something that was taken lightly at all in this culture, not even when they were children. When Temujin had any time, the secret histories speak of the games they would kind of play together. As you can imagine, these hard-ass people's ideas of games were like learning to stand on a horse at full gallop and shoot targets, but as close to games as Mongols ever got. In fact, this is the closest the secret histories get to suggesting that Temujin ever had any fun. The boys exchanged gifts and renewed their blood brother ceremonies whenever they got the chance. So the next year, however, Jamuka's family did not return. It was some time before the two would come together again, but Jamuka would be a very important figure in Temujin's later rise to power. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, later on, we'd be able to understand a little bit more of what impact Jamuka had. But for now, I think it's good to just continue on with a little bit of his earlier, or a little bit of the earlier life.
I agree, but I encourage everybody listening, remember the name Jamuka because it's gonna come up again. So, as much as Temujin loved Jamuka, he hated his older half-brother, Bektar. He did not care for the older boys bullying authority like one little fucking bit. I can tell you that much. There was a hierarchy to family life in the Mongol herders. Because shit was so dangerous all the time between animals, weather, raiders, whatever else, Mongol children were raised to obey their parents, no questions asked. So you were given an order, you jumped to it because it was the difference between life and death. To not do that, it just means it was a tumble shit heap of a raiding world. So everything rested on whoever the older male was. Now, if there wasn't a father, the task of head bitch in charge fell to the eldest son. That means older brother had the right to control everything down to the tasks completed that day to taking whatever he wanted from whoever he wanted. He essentially, by custom, had the right to power over everyone in the family clan. Now, Bector and Temujin had never really been fans of each other. Again, you'll remember the father taking him to find a bride, and that was maybe probably the central catalyst. So you can imagine how Temujin took the following shit I'm about to get to. The straw that broke the camel's back began with a bird and a fish. First, Temujin brought down a bird and Bector demanded it from him. But when he did, he happily lorded it over Temujin, how much more powerful he was by tradition. The little bastard was having a real good time with it. Let me put it that way. And that was a mistake number fucking one. And number two came not long after when Temujin and his full brother Khazar caught a fish, and Bector, along with Bector's full brother Belgate, took the fish from him, which bad decision, brah. Whoo.
Yeah. And people, and, these tribes, especially, people take pride in what they catch. This is their life. This is food on the table. If you take that from them, I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, imagine somebody taking something from you that is very valuable to you,
You're exactly right. It was the difference between life and death, these things they took. And so I can see the pride of him wanting to bring back the catch that he made that he wasn't making, but older brother was going to take all the credit. And so after the fish incident, this was enough for Temujin, who took his younger full brother Khazar and returned to their mother Ulan to say they had enough of this bullshit out of Bector, do something, Mom. But Ulan took Bector's side in the matter, reminding the boys that they should be more worried about their enemies, the Taichud, who abandoned them, and that it was their place to essentially follow their older brother. Not only that, but the eldest son Bector would have the choice of taking a wife of any of his father's widows except his own mother, Sochigol. In fact, it was a common practice, and Oilan chose this inopportune moment to remind Temujin of the fact, and that she would essentially accept this. That means that little shit Bector would soon have his eyes on going balls deep in Temujin's mother and a lifelong right to bully and lord it over him, which, if we know anything about the man Temujin was to become, that shit was untenable to this little badass. It wasn't going to happen. What do you think's going to happen in this story?
So there's going to be some body parts laying around here that, if people could draw a picture in their head, I think they would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I agree. You don't fuck with Genghis Khan, not even when his name was not Genghis Khan. Let's put it that way. So Temujin takes his brother Khazar, says, fuck that noise, and together they decide to go hunting. It just happens to be for Bector. So they find Bector perched on a grassy knoll, which really quickly, an aside, shit's never good when you mention grassy knolls a la JFK. Someone is getting shot, that's for sure. Just the word grassy knoll in history means someone's getting shot. So they sneak up on Bector, Temujin making the decision that Khazar should approach from the front as he was the better shot. Temujin was to climb up the back for his approach. So they silently stalked Bector as if he was a deer, and when they were within striking distance, the two boys stood with their bows trained on Bector. Now, Begter refused to fight, laughing almost, as he would not deign to show fear or take Temujin seriously. And this moron is like the first in a very long line of people who will regret not taking Temujin dead serious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know what I was saying? Like, this is the very first. This is the first time that somebody laughs at him, but everybody's going to learn.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. We're talking little boys here. These guys are planning out the death of somebody. Hey, you're going to flank in the front. I'm going to flank in the back. You're the better shot. When you get it, take it, fuck him up. We're done. We're done with this bullshit and we can move on from here. Little boys planning a pretty much assassination of somebody.
Yeah, because I'm going to say there's no proof that Temujin isn't still 8, maybe 9 at the earliest. That is insane to me. Like, that's how intense these boys were, especially when led by him. You're exactly right. That is superior military tactics. Like, it blows my mind. So
it's a military-driven mindset.
That's exactly right. That's how you conquer nations, starting with something so simple. So we went through, and now they've snuck up on Begter. They're pointing their arrows at Begter. So the secret history reports Begter said to Temujin what his mother basically said, that the Taichud were the real enemy, stating, I am not the lash in your eye, the impediment in your mouth. Without me, you have no companion but your own shadow. Which didn't seem to touch Temujin in the least, as on his signal, both he and his brother Khazar fired their arrows into Begter, which is freaking metal. Like, it's so intense. So the Mongols had this thing about mentioning either death or blood. It's like a no-no taboo. So rather than risk any contamination from Begter's blood, Temujin merely left him to die alone. The secret history doesn't say if it was quick or if he was left to bleed to death. So knowing that blood and death are like off the Mongol conversation table talk, it's extremely, like, this obviously made an extraordinary impression on the mind of those that were writing the secret history. Because I feel like it's at this moment, it really defined Temujin. Like, he was not going to be a follower. He was going to be a leader. And this was that defining moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like he had finally accomplished that first thing. Not for people to write about, for him to set himself up for success, mindset-wise.
I agree. He wasn't going to take orders from anybody else over something as stupid as, like, order of birth. He wasn't interested in that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some unwritten portions in there where we don't know how Begter really was. I mean, I'm guessing he probably didn't take care of the family as well as he should for Temujin to take it that far. Like, he must have been fucking up the family's lifestyle for Temujin to take it this far,
I agree. Like, I don't know, like, maybe he was eating the food for just himself instead of bringing it back. We also know their dad was kind of a shithead and obviously spent a lot more time with his dad than what, say, Temujin would. So I wonder if he was just maybe picking up on those shitty vibes from his half-assed dad. So there are a lot of things that went into it, but I think it's really, really interesting that this became the defining moment for Temujin. Like, he's not going to take your shit. He's not about it.
Yeah.
You're just going to die. Like, either you help me or get out of my way. I don't care either way.
Yeah.
But when his mother, Oilun, found out, she was fucking furious. Now, the secret histories record her rant and the longest monologue in the entire thing. ending with the same warning Begter had given. Now you have no companion other than your shadow, essentially. But Temujin, he was already playing for the win this early in life. That shit, Begter wasn't going balls deep in his mom, and he sure as shit, in Temujin's mind, wasn't fit to lead, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're completely writing a totally different history if Bector is not dead, you know?
I agree. Like that changes everything. And so I don't know when that change occurred. We just don't know where Temujin got it in his mind that you're a freaking idiot. I can do this 1,000 times better. You're done. And I don't think it was just about his mom and just about him being a shit. I think it was like he recognized you are not fit to be a leader, even
Yeah.
at this young age.
I mean, his mindset, his brain activity is on a totally different level than we could probably ever imagine. His thought process on things, his way of life, adapting, this guy was no fucking joke. I know at 8 or 9 years old, I was not thinking about how I could better my life any further. I'm watching cartoons, letting my parents help me take a bath, get my clothes ready for me, watching my mom iron everything, you know?
You're exactly right. While this kid is trying to figure out how to conquer nations. Like,
Yeah.
it is unbelievable to me. I wanted to include that little side story because it's considered a very crucial part of the story of the secret history. It was already known that Temujin could use everyday skills to make war in a far superior way than even the people that existed around him who were full grown adults were. He was already a tactical thinker, utilizing Khazar's better skills for a deadlier shot. He was willing to shit on custom, shit on caste, defy his elders, and if it came down to it, knock off a family member to get to the top. Temujin wouldn't be a follower the rest of his life. He would be a leader. Whatever happened to him in the future wouldn't be left to chance once he had enough power. Does that make sense? Like he was going to be the maker of his own destiny.
Yeah. He's writing his own story and people are following it.
That's exactly right. And think about how young a kid he is, though. I mean, he's still sadly got a lot to learn. So not just yet has he started to forge that destiny. Now, Begter's body was left where it lay to the open sky, as was custom. Temujin was now essentially head of the family as the next oldest, yeah? But up to this point, the family had just been outcasts, not criminals. The Taichud were the aristocratic leaders of the area they still continued to make camp in. So those that had left them to starve and the family's continued presence in the area shamed and angered the Taichud. They saw and heard evidence of Temujin's crime. They hunted him down and captured him. Temujin was not even at this time yet a teenager, but he was about to prove just how bad of an ass he was becoming. So normally I would wrap up with us happy in counterculture, and we're running a little long, so we're going to be short in this series on counterculture. But what I want to get are your thoughts, Frank.
Thoughts, overwhelming amount of knowledge. I mean, we're learning so much right now. It's almost a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in. And what gets me is that's a lot to take in considering this is an 8 and 9-year-old boy.
Yeah. The amount of knowledge we gained from just his childhood, not teenagehood, not late 20s, early 20s. We're talking.
He's a little fucking kid, man.
Yeah. Yeah, who's been through a lot, who lives in one of the harshest places on earth. Well, not one, but, it is harsh.
No, it's really harsh. You know what it reminds me of? Where I recently moved from and where you still currently live. When they describe the steppe, it reminds me of the panhandle of Texas, actually,
Yeah.
where it can go from one weather extreme, like it could be 60 degrees that morning, and then it's a blowing blizzard at night.
Yeah. Sandstorms, rain,
Rain.
continuous rain.
Exactly. It
I mean,
just, oh. Also, the tactical precision that he used in killing the older brother he wanted to oppose.
yes, I think that really sets the tone for what we can expect from here on out. Tactical, smart, a thinker.
God, I think he must have been a genius. Like, just what we're going to get into later. I mean, I really do think that he was a genius. Like, really and truly, he saw everything, or a complete sociopath. It doesn't matter either way. Like, he saw everything to tactical advantage, and that was at that age. So that's just crazy to me. That's why I think
Yeah.
he's such a crazy figure.
When you thought you had him, he was already 2 steps ahead of you. The part that I wish we did have more information on was just what he looked like. I mean, when we think of Mongols, I mean, we're thinking of like, in my mind, I'm thinking of Mulan. You've seen Mulan, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
We're thinking of like the Hun guy from Mulan. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
a big long beard, long hair, muscular as fuck. I wish we could have a real life presentation of what he really looked like, you know?
I agree. Like the very least inkling of what he probably looked like, because the Mongolians were direct descendants of the Huns of earlier times. So I imagine they have to be something kind of like what you imagine in that Mulan pictorial of like a Hun.
Yeah.
That's what the Mongolians are going to be. But I mean, who knows? I'd be very, very interested.
Yeah. This kind of brings me to a point I've been thinking about. One of my favorite movies of all time, The Gladiator. Uh,
Mm.
we think of him right now, what our kids know, what we thought we knew. We think of in the very first fight scene of The Gladiator where they're fighting that tribe, big animal fur coats. It's almost like the opposite of that. Like he is the Roman Empire who is tactically well put together.
You're
Everything
exactly
is,
right.
he is the guy in charge. Like, I want people to kind of get that aspect of him. It's like, this guy's a genius. He knows what he's doing. He's not a nomadic tribe just trying to take over, fuck shit up, do what he can, bang women, kill their husbands. Like, it's not like that. It's way more. He's setting up his people for success. And I think further on down this series, we're going to get to that.
I agree with that 100% because I think you're exactly right. We imagine him as this Central European Celtic or like a Gaulish figure. And we think of him not even as Julius Caesar, we think of him as the Gauls, the Celts, whatever, Julius Caesar. But no, 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 no. It's like we said, it took him 25 years to conquer what it took Rome 400 years to do.
Yeah, and Rome they were a very, very advanced civilization. We're talking one of the best out there.
But
Top
more,
five.
yeah, no,
Top five
definitely.
in my opinion. Top five in my opinion.
But more interestingly, this is after the fall of the Roman Empire. And so you want to talk about Charlemagne, you want to talk about all those things. And by the time we finish our series, I'm going to contend that the Renaissance would not have been possible without the conquering of the Mongol Empire, just because they shared knowledge from Far East to West and put it back into Europe. And essentially, I would argue that the Mongols might have ended the Dark Ages. So
Yeah.
this isn't a guy that's a senseless barbarian. That's not who he is at all.
Yeah, definitely. So, question now. You gonna make it out to a Genghis Grill? I know there's one out there.
Yes, I am. Now that I know that such a thing exists, absolutely. So what I'll do is we're going to go eat there. And next episode, I'm going to report to everybody how good or bad I think the Genghis Grill is. Although I'm going to probably have a feeling that I'm pulling for it.
Yeah.
It sounds delicious.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up today quickly. Follow the show on Instagram at Body Count Pod. And we beg you again, please subscribe, rate, review. We drop every Wednesday wherever you listen to podcasts. It's particularly important to us that you go ahead and do that on iTunes. I can be found at Jessica B. Manor on Twitter and Instagram. Where do people find you, Frank?
I'm on Facebook. Madison, who's done a couple shows, I'm sure you'll follow her. She tags me in a bunch of stuff. On Facebook with her. Instagram, I'm mainly Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is at the Frankie Garcia, so you can find me there on Instagram. Twitter, I'm kind of bobbling back and forth. I don't really like it, but I kind of do at the same time. It's at the Frank_Garcia, so I can be found there.
That cracks me up. See, because I love Twitter. I love Twitter.
I've heard.
I know you've heard. We have a substantial following that's starting to exist. See, I'm just bad at Instagram and Facebook. I'm not even on.
Which it's crazy to me, honestly, how quickly this has taken off for you guys. Like, podcasts for people, they spend months, years trying to just have a show or, a thing like what you're doing take off. It's a slow process, but for what you have done in the little amount of time that you've had, I'm impressed by it.
I agree. And I'm like, even the listenership that we get and the downloads that we get, I'm always really, really impressed by it. And I'm very, very thankful for it. Because I think of myself as an idiot. Now, I do want to stress, I do the research, but like, even though Madison's on some deals, like, people really, really love Madison and people really, really love Bethany. Like, it's become a culture. So I'm really, really excited that you could be on this episode, because at the end of the day, a lot of research goes into these multi-parters. I cannot stress to people. That's why we have so many filler episodes where we're drunk and having fun. Because when we sit down and do these, it's like 4 to 5 weeks of your life are eaten up and consumed by just being in study. What have I been doing this for a month probably now?
Yeah, we've definitely, the process of me and you trying to do a podcast
It's been 3 weeks. Like, we've put a lot of filler in, and so we were so excited to finally bring you guys Genghis Khan, because it's a big hitter. It's a history big hitter. So
yeah,
I would say that you're probably going to end up helping me when it comes time that we look at Caesar, when it comes time that we look at Napoleon. So you guys should just all get used to Frank's voice on these podcasts for me. You were an incredible help. I cannot thank you enough. So no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm thankful to be on this podcast. Like, definitely marking something off one of my bucket lists.
Woo!
I've always wanted to have my own podcast with a couple of buddies, talk about bullshit all the time. Whether or not that'll take off or if it ever gets done, probably not. But I can at least say I've been in one.
Oh, I think you're going to be in more. You're at least going to be more on this series, because you are my other Genghis Khan authority that I fall back on to. It's just a lot of work. It's been really good. We've had kind of a bullshit tour here recently of like fall down, drunk, funny episodes, but I was really glad that it was all in preparation for Genghis Khan, where we took it seriously. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And I'm so glad you joined me for this heavy hitter. So everybody be ready. Frank Garcia is going to be back with me next week. And I don't have anything else. Do you, Frankie?
I'm good. I'm all spoken out.
All right. We've been on here long enough. So thank you guys so much. We will speak to you next week. Bye-bye.